welcome to the International Conference Left Theory for the 21st Century, organized by the Institute Nicos Poulantzas, the institute and think tank of the Greek left. The institute was founded in 1997 in honor of the great political scientist and activist Nicos Poulantzas. The institute is committed to the ideals and values of socialism with democracy and freedom. And perhaps you will remember that the last page of the last book of Nicos Poulantzas said that socialism will be democratic or will not be. This is precisely our idea. The mission of the Institute is to contribute to the ideological, theoretical, and political debate on the left through lectures, conferences, seminars, workshops, research programs, and publications. You can find our many activities and publications on the website of the Institute. The conference today and tomorrow is the second in a research program funded by Transform Europe, and it aims to put into dialogue left theory and political practice. We have a very busy program over 2 days. The first day, today, puts into conversation classical and newer forms of radical theory with the unique experience of the SYRIZA government, the only radical left party in Europe which gained power in 2015. The second day, tomorrow, discusses left responses to the dark times we live through. So it is a very rich program, quite busy 2 days. Before we start, however, we have a few messages from friends of the Institute. First, Heinz Beerbaum, the president of the Party of the European Left, has sent us a pre-recorded message.
Nicos Poulantzas Institute to hold a conference dedicated to a left theory in the 21st century in cooperation with Transform. It's without any doubt of great importance. 2 themes will be addressed: left governmentality, rise of authoritarianism. The themes are linked to each other. Concerning left governmentality, the experience of SYRIZA government is supposed to be analyzed. And indeed, we need a profound analysis of left government experience. We have all the other examples of left being part of the government. In Portugal, today in Spain and Finland. Currently, we have also in Germany a broad and controversial debate about the possible participation of the left in a so-called red-green-red government. This is certainly an interesting discussion, but far from being likely. To analyze theoretically those experiences is very important for the left strategic discussion. Consequences have to be drawn for the policy and strategy of the left. On the other hand, it's as well very important to analyze the global rise of authoritarianism and the far-right populism. Trump in the US, Bolsonaro in Brazil, Orban and Erdogan in Europe. In particular, in a situation which is determined by the COVID-19 pandemic. The pandemic is very often used for dismantling democratic rights or for escalation and confrontation, like Trump did against China. The conference is dedicated to the memory of Leo PANICH, who recently passed away. Leo PANICH was an outstanding representative of the new left. His death is a huge loss. But I'm convinced that the thinking of Leo PANICH will inspire this conference. I wish the conference every success. Unfortunately, I can't attend the conference in person, but I'm sure that the results of the conference will be taken into consideration in the political discussion about the policy and strategy of the European left.
Four pictures, but they're saying you're talking, but you can barely hear that.
You are now muted.
I can start. Yeah? Okay. Next, we move to Spain and Maga Ferre, the co-president of Transform Europe. And it is always a great pleasure for a researcher to welcome the representative of our funder, because Transform Europe has very kindly funded the program of left theory in the 21st century. So over to you, Marga.
Thank you very much. Thank you all of the attendance of this great conference. Thank you, Costas. Thank you, Michalis. I am Marga Ferre. As you told, I'm the co-chair of Transform Network. Just to share with you that Transform Network is precisely a network of political thinking and dialogue of different centers and political foundations all over Europe. We gather more than 30 organizations for 23 countries in Europe. One of them, and the most important, is the PI, the Nicos Poulantzas Institute. I will thank Nicos Poulantzas for the contribution to the Transform Network and the thinking at European left for all these years from the beginning of Transform Network. Just to say to you that you can find more information about our network in the website in transformnetwork.net, and also you can see our newsletter, which I think could be interesting because you can find analysis all around Europe, and specifically also contribution from the MPI, from the Nicos Poulantzas Institute, constantly. And we also want to thank Danai Costidas, which is also member of the MPI, the Nicos Poulantzas Institute, and also the vice president of Transform Network. So what is the left theory in a moment like this, where we can see that the planet, the Earth, is facing one of the most serious and severe crises in our history? We can see, I think all of us agrees on the idea that the global dimension of this coronavirus crisis has demonstrated once again the inefficiency of the neoliberalism in order to resolve general and specific problems of the working class or the subordinated classes, as Gramsci proposed years ago. It's clear for everybody that neoliberalism has failed, or translated it in a word that we used a lot talking about Greece crisis some years ago, is the end of the austerity measures that was criminally imposed in Greece when SYRIZA took government in 2015. And this is the major difference among that crisis and this one. The response not only of the European Union, but the rest of the government all around the world, but particularly in our continent, is something like the adoption of some kind of heterodox economic social measures. That's for orthodox neoliberalism, who has been ruling the economy in Europe and in the Western world in the last 40 years. No? And it's a shift. We could see that the governments all around Europe has focused primarily on the consequences of this crisis. So we saw in this crisis how the austerity measures are not imposed anymore stronger way they used to be imposed in the past, and with some kind of attenuances or measures to shift unemployment, the poverty, or inequality. But none of this measure made by the government in this crisis are going to resolve or to prevent the economic recession that at least all the economic inputs said that we are going to face, we are facing now, and we are going to face in the near future. And it's like focus it on the consequences is like a pragmatic way of the liberals to face this crisis. But I honestly think that the role of the left, the role of the theoretical field of the left, is not thinking only on the immediate consequences of this crisis, but most in a long run, and to create a correct diagnosis of what is happening today in order to reinforce and strengthen the popular classes to avoid to pay the crisis as we did the previous crisis in 2008. And we think Transform that in order to do that, it is essential too to understand and to study the crisis of the contrary capitalism today. Because it is clear that in all the analysis by the intellectuals, not only of the left, neoliberal fields, are declaring there are different crises where capitalism has been developing in the recent years, and precisely of this coronavirus crisis, it is clear that a shift, even for the classes, are going to be imposed. Let's say that this virus is not the reason of the crisis, but is an erasure of it, no? And based on the painful lessons we learned in the previous crisis in 2008, particularly Greece, also Spain is my country, and Spain. So it is clear that this measure imposed by the austerity are not acceptable today. When I say it's not acceptable, it's because we do believe that it's not acceptable for the majority of the population. New common sense that has arisen in all of our countries, demanding a protector state or a different way of addressing this situation. When we see the heroic action of the working class during this coronavirus crisis, not only the public services, the health workers, but also the ordinary workers who are taking in their shoulders how this society is working, it's clear that a new common sense is arising all around the world, and particularly in Europe, saying that we don't want austerity measures anymore. We want a state who can protect ourselves for this crisis. So, as we see, the main difference of the crisis in 2008 and today is a reaction of the governments and the European Union. And I must say, as I'm a Spaniard, that in Spain, the radical left is part of the government today. We are in a coalition with the Socialist Party, and the main difference with SYRIZA government, and I think it's something that we are going to debate today, is the reaction of the European Union, of the rest of the forces. The capitalist reaction is not aggressive against Spain today as it was against Greece in 2015. Imagine what would have happened if SYRIZA were the government without the aggression of the European Union at that moment, as we are luckily having now here in Spain. Anyway, coming back to the idea of how the governments are responsive to the crisis, we see and we agree is that some kind of new Keynesianism coming again to the economic ministries and even in the economic universities. Even Keynes was called like radical and acceptable for the neoliberals, now coming back again to the role of the state and this kind of neo-Keynesianism. But what we analyze in Transform, and this is an idea coming back from Walter Bayer, who was the previous political coordinator of Transform, is that for us, the question is not coming back to Keynes. The question is proposing in this crisis that the way out of this crisis must come from a realistic vision of economic democracy. Meaning that let's talk about the property of the state, not only of some kind of companies from the strategic sectors needed to avoid crises like this. The question of the privatization of the health system in different countries. And let's come back again to talk about the necessity of a public health system, a public companies, or at least co-owned public companies with private companies, because we saw in this crisis the incapability of these countries to produce some of the commodities needed to attend our population, not only in question of the vaccines or question of logistics. So it's the idea of coming back to a new kind of democracy in economy, where population can take decisions on these questions. Let's talk about this question, the regulation of the economy, the role of the state, the public sector, the democratic orientation of the recovery funds that have been approved at the European Union, summarizing a social economy. I think in order to, we must do this in a serious way, in a scientific way, in order to prevent something very simple, is that we are not going to exit this crisis only on the invisible hand of the free market. And if we accept that, it is clear that we have to come back again to the role of the state on the realm of the social economy in a democratic way. Because in addition to this coronavirus crisis, we must not forget that the world is facing also the climate catastrophe, which were the main problem before this crisis all around the world is the limit of capitalism. Clearly, one of the limits of the capitalism is there. And that is why, and let me come back again to the beginning of my speech, why we see that even the ruling classes and the defenders of the neoliberalism has saying that capitalism has to change. The OECD studies and reports said that this shift has to be from the financialization of the economy, I mean the casino capitalism we suffered in the last decade, to something they call like green capitalism and digital capitalism, which is how the ruling classes want to face the climate changes through the private sector in this kind of new Green Deal or green capitalism, and in other way, something very important for us, which is the changes in the work world because of this question of the digital platforms and the digital capitalism, the platform economy. So it's something that we clearly need to face in this moment. Another question is that this huge crisis has put on the table again basic questions for human beings as a species, I mean, not only as citizens. No? And this is the idea if it is possible to organize the world in a different way, or there is no possibilities of changing the business as usual. So we see, at least in the intellectual field of the left, some kind of debate about the question of possibilism versus utopia. No? If this not, or it is the time to put again on the question of the utopia, meaning a different future and a different way of organizing the world and our lives. So I particularly think that a global disaster, as we are suffering, make that a majority of the population reclaim what is logical, rational, which is a new kind of a state to protect and to give public services and to rethink a productive model in our countries. And this is particularly important in the southern countries of Europe in order to stop the precariousness of the majority of our lives. No? So it's like this kind of new common sense. No? It's like some kind of new consensus among major part of our population that we need to change some things and we cannot go in this direction the way as we did. No? So I think that if we see that this kind of consensus that we must rethink the role of the state, the role of the European Union, what kind of communities do we want, what we need to protect ourselves and at the same time to make a better societies, it is clear for me that this kind of new common sense is not enough. Because let's be clear, capitalism is not going to change alone. Or, I mean, in other words, the big companies who are ruling part of our economies in the Western world are not going to change or take decisions in favor of the people because they want to do it. They have to be forced to do that. And that is the reason that is very important for the left to be in power. Not only to protest on the street, which is absolutely essential, but at the same time to make to be at least, or to have at least political power, which is not the same, or to have a real power, as SYRIZA knows perfectly well. I mean, it's not only the consensus what we need, but it's nemesis also, no? Which is the coercion. You know? It's just like Machiavelli, remember, no? The charge and the sword, no? In order to force the free market to go in the direction of the benefit of the majority of the populations. No? So in order to think and to understand this kind of new kind of productive models, how to stop the climate change or how to create an economic protective system for the citizens, clearly demands the public intervention in the economy. I think this is the rationale, and this is the debate we're going to have immediately. And why not in the left, in conference like this, start thinking, start imagining, start debating this new wave of social economy, social and democratic economy. Let me go to the last part of my intervention with some kind of cracks, I would say, that we detect in contemporary capitalism, at least in the Western world in this moment, because this crisis also changed the way capital used to do things, and the good things. We detect like 4 cracks. No, the first one is that this crisis is driving in a concentration of capital in fewer hands than before, and this is not good. I mean, the ILO, the International Labour Organization, has made a report saying that more than 500 million small and medium companies has been affected by this crisis, meaning that in all of our countries we see that the small and medium companies has been really hard times, particularly in the tourist sector, but in different sectors. And there are the big companies, the transnational companies waiting to buy part of these small and medium companies or enterprises. The second crack we see, besides the concentration of capital in a strong way than before, is that there are some countries who are using this pandemic to cut rights or to act in a more authoritarian way. And this is the exact contrary we left wants to do things. But we must be aware of it, particularly in Hungary, in Poland, or in different countries. And the third crack we see is that in spite of all the measures imposed by the government in order to resolve the situation created by the coronavirus crisis, as we said before, it is clear that the climate change is there, and it has to be faced immediately. Is not, I mean, the proposal by the European Union made on the New Green Deal is not enough. Clearly, we as leftists, we must think introduce in our left theory the limits of the planet in a more clear way. And the last crack we see created by this crisis is the question of work. There was a report made by an American foundation, I don't remember the name, sorry, saying that the 30% of the workers are not coming back to the workplaces as they used to be before the coronavirus crisis, because this question of telework, of work in distance has come to stay among us. And that means a huge change in the way we organize the working class or the work. And we must be aware about this question of the digital platforms, of the way we must take care of the workers in this new way. So let me finish really, with based on this analysis, what we see is that who could be the political subject for the change, or who are the sectors who can confront or at least reveal different way of doing things in this particular crisis. And we see that one of the responses of capitalism to this crisis is, as always, to increase the exploitation through the work, which is the way the world is acting. So we see that there is more pressure on the most precarious part of our societies. And that means women and racialized people. I mean, migrants or people from different races, and youth and the young people. And the ILO, so we see that it's not strange that the most important revolts around the world in the last year were first, the Black Lives Matter in the United States. We see this summer in the States the most important or anti-racism movement in decades in the state. On the other hand, we see the feminist movement. Yes, I'm finishing now. We see the feminist movement all around the world, where the women are demanding their rights. And we see that it's not casualty. It is because they are the most precarious part of society. So who are the subjects we as leftists must to focus on? And Wind Transfer suggested the idea to work more clearly, incorporate and introduce the feminist theory and the ones in our work, the racialized people, I mean, people from different perspectives. We see that this is one of the key of the future, to rethink ourselves and the proposals in order to offer hope in a world when we see that there is no hope yet, unless we open the debates like this one to talk among different sectors, different people, different theories, in order to create this kind of hope that we really need, I think the world needed today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Marga Ferrer. It was an interesting introduction to our conference. And now let me welcome Dimitris Giannakopoulos, the Secretary of the Central Committee of SYRIZA and one of the great intellectuals of the Greek left. Over to you, Dimitris.
Thank you very much, Costas. I don't know what to say for your good words. I will try to be as short as possible because the time has passed. I want to thank, of course, Transforming Europe and the Nicos Poulantzas Institute for this conference, which is, I think, what we right now need in order to put together theory and political practice. And you, Michalis, Costas, and I guess Marga, with whom I share, especially with Costas and Michalis, many intellectual and theoretical questions. And as far as I could say from your introduction, Marga, I share many of the thoughts and the questions that you put into focus today. And I guess, as all of you know, this effort to put together left theory and critical theory, Marxism, and political practice is one of the huge questions of materialist philosophy for the last 200 years, I guess. So you have put yourselves into a very difficult task, I guess, Michalis and Costas, with this conference, which focuses on the SYRIZA government experience and, of course, the new advance of what Michalis and Jean-Luc Nancy name the negativity, this negativity that actually right now is hegemonic in the social field and the political field of today's constellation. And the big question for the left, the big question for the European left, for its political parties and its movements, is how to transgress this negativity, or how to reform this negativity, or how to transform this negativity into something which is creative, which is alive, which will actually negate itself and will be turned into a new political and social power for change. From my point of view, the question of negativity and the question of the advance of what we could say the politics of fear and the politics of discipline and the politics of actually channeling the social unrest into solutions of closing into ourselves is to try to understand the way that this negativity actually works in a way that leads to the advance of political movements and social movements that are actually reactionary. What we saw last week in the Capitol was exactly this peak of negativity and this new situation in today's political and ideological constellation. So my question, and I think that this would be very important for the conference to try and answer, is this. From the theory of ideology and from Louis Althusser and all the works that followed him, we know that ideology interpellates the atoms as subjects. The question is how this interpellation works and what is the decisive point of the way that we are interpellated. Why are we interpellated as left subjects or as right-wing subjects? What is the decisive point of this interpellation? And this is the main question that that opened with a conversation, with a debate that I have in mind and which I shared with Michalis a few days back, that opened during the 70s and the 80s about the fascist experience during the 30s and the 40s. What was the reason for the interpellation of the masses into such a way that led to the fascist regimes? I have in mind many answers. I have in mind the answer of Hannah Arendt. I have in my answer of Jean-Pierre Fay. But I also have the answer of Nicos Poulantzas, who said and wrote against those theoreticians that it is extremely important to not psychologize the answer, not to say that the masses one day woke up and loved fascism for any reason that anyone could imagine. But he said that we have to take into account always the material conditions, which also Marga Ferré pointed in her intervention. So I think that for left theory, this is right now, in my view, in my opinion, in the way that I see things, the main and the most important question to answer, because it is exactly the point where left theory and political practice actually cross each other and come together, because it is the way that we answer this question that will lead us to certain political interventions, to certain and to specific political and to a specific political way of acting and trying to enter and organically be connected with the subordinated classes. So I think that the experience of 2010 to 2018 and 19 in Greece gives us a rich material for thinking and rethinking these very important questions. So with these thoughts and with this and with my point of view, I hope that this conference will help us understand ourselves better, understand our societies better, and understand today's constellation and relation of forces better. And I hope that you will have great sessions and that you will also enjoy the conversation, which is quite important in today's in today's conditions, where enjoyment has taken a quite wrong path. Thank you very much, and I hope everything goes well for you, and for me, and for us.
Thank you very much, Dimitri, and it was a very interesting set of questions you said to us, and I'm sure we will discuss them. Now, the conference is dedicated to the memory of Leo PANICH, comrade, intellectual friend. Leo had agreed to open the conference, but the pandemic evil we live through decided otherwise. He passed away on December last, 19 December. Sam Gindin, professor at York University, a close friend and collaborator of Leo, has sent us a pre-recorded message which follows.
Thank you for inviting me to this conference honoring Leo in the country that has always held such a special place for Leo and Melanie. Leo couldn't wait to come to Greece and get into the intense but always comradely theoretical and political arguments and debates with his Greek comrades. All the more so if this came with platefuls of seafood and too much to drink. He loved to walk the streets of Athens, whether day or night. And as his close friend Michalis Bartsidis said, he always raced ahead, as if walking faster might get him to socialism sooner. He agreed that the philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point is to change it. But what shines through in everything that Leo has said